I got the tubes that are going to have the mounts for the coilovers on them bent. They're just kind of roughed into place. Got a strap just pinching them to hold them there. They're not perfect. It was just kind of a make sure everything fits, looks good, the angles were bent right, everything's alright. What I have to do is there's the front piece down there, I got to trim about 1/4 inch off so that the angle here and the angle on the frame will both line up. And then it's going to be pull this off, clean all the mill scale off everywhere. I still need to trim 1/16 off that rail, and it'll be ready to start tacking stuff in place. And if you watched the video before this about the bender, that is the piece. Alright. That's funny, this thing won't do that. 4-degree spring back, I still have to cut the notch in that and then what it is on the other end. But that's your cheater piece. So the back bar is kind of welded in. I got the inside and the top, and I squeaked it too close. I can't get the angle I need in there to put my MIG in there, so depending on if I can order a bigger cup or a smaller nozzle for the MIG to get in there. If not, I'll just TIG weld it. And what I did now is strap the things back up, leveled everything off, checked the width, everything's good, and then marked, if you can see it, soapstone. I made marks on the frame so when the tube comes out, I know where to grind off the mill scale and get all the crap out of the way. You see it's already cleaned off on the rectangle. So that's the next thing, is taking that back apart one more time, cleaning all the mill scale off, and then tacking it up. Some of the welding's done. Gotta work on wrapping my edges with a MIG welder. I don't MIG weld a lot. Usually only at the house. At work it's stick and TIG welding all day, so. But, running a straight line don't look too bad. But yeah, this is all good to go. I decided not to bend the hoop around the back because it would have cut room on the corner, and I would have had to take the bend out even further, and this is the dimension here for the bigger fuel cell if I ever decide to go with it one day. So that's that. I'll get the bottoms of all this. Obviously I didn't get the underside here, the very bottoms of this, and I still have to plate the bottom of that, and I still need to have my brackets for the shocks, but they're not here yet. So when they get here, I'll put those on, probably get the rear end sitting like on its own, and then once it's good and I like everything, then I'll strip back down one more time, flip the frame upside down, finish all the welding on it, and then continue forward, because that still looks the same. Yeah. So I had these made a really long time ago. These were the saddle mounts for the uprights on the S chassis rear subframe. I was gonna make my own control arms. Didn't really know what I was doing. I think I hand drew something for this and gave it to a guy, and he just kind of worked in a shop where they did this stuff, so he kind of made these on the side for me. I think I had a dozen of these made or something like that. Well, now that I look at them, they're too big. This piece is too big. I think the holes were a hair too small, and the opening right here was too wide, like 1/8 of an inch too wide. So it's just whatever. And they're too long. They're too long this way. Like, they're huge. So My next option that I'd seen people do before, if you saw those up there, is I had this piece cut. And what this piece is ultimately that same thing, except I don't have access to a CNC bender, which is what bent this. Or even not so much a CNC bender, but a finger bender you set up that can do stuff like this repeatedly and make nice bends in it. So the next best thing is to make a piece like this and put slits in it. And what you do with that is you make this. You basically use the slits as the weakest part, bend the tabs over, and you get your saddle mount, which obviously you can see the difference in these. It's like ridiculous how big and dumb this one looks. Oh, plus the reason these holes are too small, I think these holes were alright for the 12mm hardware I had, but on the full sphericals I have on the rear end, they're 1/2" bolts, so I just went ahead and had these cut for 1/2" and they're ready to go. You can drill, I can't drill these out, but like I said, look at the difference in that. It's huge. These are big and dumb. This is streamlined, small, and smooth, and works just as good. And what you do with this is you'd get it set up in a jig. I think this falls within a few thousandths, which is going to be your powder coat on each side, but still I'll set up a jig or a spacer to put in here and then run a weld bead down each side of this. Then that locks this in place, and then you can continue on with whatever arm you're going to make or whatever you're going to do with it. So I'll show you how to bend these up in the vise. It's really actually quite simple. Now what you do here is clamp it in your vise. Obviously I've lined up the bottom of the cut with the top of the jaws on the vise. You can use a crescent wrench. I just have this little brass hammer, and with the slit being, I think I left an 1/8" on each end over here of material. So with the hammer you're not going to get any, just falls right over just like that. Now obviously you want to check that with the gauge. You can bend it back and forth, because ultimately what's going to happen is when it's all finished, you're going to run a weld bead down this, and then that locks it in place. Now I'll show you how to get the other side, because my jaws aren't deep enough. If I try to put this in there, it hits. So to do the other side once it's already bent, if your jaws aren't deep enough, just use a spacer. That'll hold it out. It lets the bottom piece fold under, and there you go. And what also came with those is these guys. These are the shock mount brackets. As you can see, I have one on back here already. The only problem is the hardware store is already closed, and I need a 5/8 bolt that's way shorter than this. To bolt this up, square this guy up, measure it, tack it. Then I only have one of these control arms, so I have to take this control arm, put it on the other side, swap this to the other side, measure that, get all that stuff up, tack that, and then I can weld these in. But I ultimately have to make a control arm before I can set this on the ground, because even with the stocker, if I put the stock rear upper control arm on this, I won't be able to put the coilover on the other side. So, hoping it's sitting under its own weight in the rear this weekend. It might not happen, but only because I don't have, well, I guess, yeah. If I can build 2 control arms this weekend, I might, because I have my saddles now. I'm just not, oh, no, I have my material for this too. Never mind. I might fab these control arms this weekend also, and maybe we're back on schedule for having it sitting on the ground. Not that that really means anything, but, you know. So in my Instagram stories, I talked about my Greddy obsession, or I don't know if it's a Greddy obsession, but back in the mid-90s, when I got into cars, these were the gauges to have. It was all Greddy stuff. And unfortunately, back then, I didn't have a lot of money, and for gauges in my car, I went with Autometer, which Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with Autometer, but back then, they didn't look like this. They didn't have full sweep stepper motors. They didn't, yeah. And, oh, this is just, I found this on Marketplace, so I figured I'd buy it. It's the stupid Greddy oil plug for the 1J. That's not for the 1J, it's a 12 by 1 1/4, so it fits the 1J oil pan, and it's got the magnet on it. So yeah, that too. And I'm slowly looking for, I think I want an oil and a water temp, and that'll be it, because obviously nowadays when you put a standalone, which is eventually what the truck is going to get, you can get digital dashes that show everything, but there's something nostalgic about having gauges to look at versus a computer screen. So that was my little rant, tidbit, whatever, on my Greddy stuff that I'm slowly picking up. Because I don't know if you've seen the new Greddy stuff, but it has a needle gauge like this, but it also has a screen that goes over it, and when you start that car, it looks like fireworks, and there's lights that come in like old flash intros on websites, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff, which is just a hair over the top. I just like the full sweeps like these, the Defies, where you turn the car on, the gauges sweep themselves and go back, and then everything's ready to go. So yeah, that's that.